Please join me in welcoming to the stage Kent Chevalier.
Good evening, everybody. Man, Davin, thank you for the opportunity to be able to be here tonight. I'm just really excited and honored to share my story with all of you. And I want to begin tonight by asking you this question. What has fear robbed you of in your life? Think about it. What has fear robbed you of in your marriage, in your business? The fear of failure? The fear of the what if, the fear of not having enough, the fear of the unknown. And so I'm just honored to be able to share this story with you. I'm still living this story, and we're in the process of still doing this what if afraid. And so I just want to simply share with you tonight my journey of becoming the chaplain to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I know that there are some Pittsburgh Steelers fans in the house, right? Right on. So, before this role as chaplain to the Steelers, I was in student ministry for 10 years. I was a youth pastor for 10 years. That's how I met Davin, okay? And then for 12 years, I was a pastor of a great church in Pittsburgh. And it was about year 10 into serving at that church in Pittsburgh that something changed inside of me. Now, my role didn't change. My responsibilities at work did not change, but something inside of me changed. Has anybody ever had that feeling? Right? You just know in your knower. That's what I like to call it. You know in your knower that something shifted. But here's the thing. I was really hesitant to chase whatever that feeling was because the last time that I chased that, it did not end well for me. And it hurt. Not only me, but my wife, and my kids, and a whole bunch of other people. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore that I had this feeling God was doing something in me, and I didn't want to chase it because I was comfortable. I was good. I had a great position going on. And I'm just wondering if there might be anybody here who might be having those same kind of feelings, especially with what it is that we're hearing at the Purpose Summit. Maybe you're here today and you have an idea that would change the trajectory of your business, but because you've got it so good at work where you are right now, you don't want to pitch that idea to your boss and upset the apple cart. Let's get personal. Maybe you're here and you've been dating her for a really long time, and you know that you want to be with her, but you're scared to really pop the question and really commit to her because you're good in your relationship where it is. Maybe you're here today, and you know what? It's time for you to leave the nest and start something new, but you've got it so good where you are, and it's hard to cut that cord. But here's the thing. I believe that there are going to be those times in our lives where God begins to mess us up on the inside until we step into that thing that He's calling us to do. And so I have to warn us. Because some of us, especially entrepreneurs, especially business folks, right? See, I'm a ministry guy. I'm a chaplain. And so this is wild for me to be with a whole bunch of business people because you all act. You make decisive decisions. You go for it. But this is where many of us get into trouble. And I'm speaking from experience here. We move into that new thing before God tells us to. Right? So we experience that holy frustration inside of us, and then we get antsy in that waiting, and so we grab onto the first thing that comes along. It's got to be that next position, that next job, I've got to go get it. Or the next house, I've got to get that. You know, if you're hiring somebody, we got to fill this position, so it's got to be the next person. Let's go. But this is where we get into trouble, and I'm speaking from experience here. And I've learned from past failures in my life and then great insights from my mentors this lesson. Here it is coming up on the screen. God's timing is just as important as His direction. God's timing is just as important as direction. So I learned my lesson from those failures, and so this time I was going to wait for God's timing. And watch this. Any San Francisco 49ers fans in the room? Okay, good, good. Great Super Bowl last year, right? Brock Purdy, love that dude. Great stuff. Watch this. It was about 2 years into that frustration and waiting that the San Francisco 49ers, they traded their tight end to the Pittsburgh Steelers. His name is Vance McDonald. Okay, and Vance McDonald, he began to attend the church where I was pastor all of those years. And so he came to church, and after the service, I said, man, I'd love to meet anybody who's new here today. Welcome. And he made a beeline after service, and he said, man, can we grab a cup of coffee? And that day, man, we grabbed a cup of coffee, and we talked for a few hours. And it was there that he shared with me that the Steelers didn't have a chaplain, and something jumped inside of me when he shared that. And I was like, what's that? What does a professional sports chaplain do? I had heard of like army chaplains, hospital chaplains, but I hadn't really heard of like NFL chaplains. What in the world do they do? And so Vance and I, we would get to know each other. In that off season, we would grab some time and coffee and conversation. He eventually said, hey, man, would you mentor me, like disciple me and a few of my buddies? And I said, fire up, man, let's go. Let's get to know each other. And so here's what Vance would do. At the end of our group, we would share prayer requests with each other. And Vance would always say, I wish that we could do what we're doing now in the Steelers locker room. And every time he shared that prayer request, something would jump inside of me. And I began to wonder, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Like, how does somebody become an NFL chaplain? Like, I didn't have a category for any of this. And I began to, like, go home to Erica and share with her, like, hey, this is what Vance is kind of saying and all this stuff. And she's like, well, talk to him about it. How does this work? And so I eventually got up the courage to ask Vance, like, bro, are you dropping hints as prayer requests? Have any of you ever done that before? Right? And do you think that maybe I'm supposed to be the chaplain for the Steelers? And he goes, no, not really, but if you're interested. And so with foot in my mouth, here's what he says. I don't know how this works either, but why don't I introduce you to Coach Tomlin? Now, you got to understand, I grew up in Pittsburgh. I'm a huge Steelers fan. And so either way, this is going to be awesome because I get to have lunch with Coach Tomlin. Are you kidding me? So we go to lunch in the Steelers practice facility, Vance, me, Coach Tomlin, and I can tell that Coach Tomlin is like vetting me. Like, what's this guy's motives? Is he just trying to get close to guys? And so he invited me to hang out at what the NFL calls OTAs, organized team activities. They're not really allowed to practice, but they're just kind of hanging out, getting to know each other, lifting weights. Why don't you come and hang out with the guys? Then he invited me, once minicamp began, he said, man, I would love for you to come and preach at minicamp chapel. So everybody, I was so excited. Oh my goodness, I couldn't believe that I would get this opportunity to go to the Steelers practice facility, see all the real 6 Super Bowl trophies. I was geeking out. This is amazing. And then came the time for chapel, and I got to preach with everything that I had, man, and I was so excited in that moment. And it ended with Coach Tomlin saying to me, I'll be in touch. So I was so anxious, and I was like, I can't wait to hear back from him. A day goes by, nothing. 3 days go by, nothing. A week goes by, nothing. 10 days go by, nothing. And so I began to sink back into that confusion, back into that waiting. Have any of you ever done something like that where you actually stepped out? And you tried something, you went for it, but then there's that wait before you land. It's like when we were little kids. You remember when we jumped off the high dive, right? And there was that moment before your feet actually hit the water, and you're like, why did I do this? Right? You question your decision-making skills. Like, why did I even go through with this? So in this moment, while I'm waiting to hear back, I was just confused. Like, God, I thought this was you. I thought this was you kind of prompting this, like going for it. So I was frustrated. Again, 2 years, 3 years had gone by. I'm waiting to hear back, and I still have a job to do, so I have to go out and do some training that I was a part in. We were starting something brand new at my church, and so we went out in that moment to California, and we were starting this at my church, and so they were helping us kind of experience it for the first time ourselves. And so they sent us out on what they called a guided prayer experience. And so I don't know if you've ever done something like this before, but basically what they said is just simply follow the prayer guide. So we've got some passages that are in there, and we would encourage you to journal down your thoughts on those passages. And so I open up my prayer guide, and basically here's what's at the very top of that page. Isaiah 43, forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way. So I began to write out my prayers, my thoughts to God about that particular passage. And so just a moment of vulnerability before all of you. This is a page out of my journal. So here's what I said to God. God, I'm trying to discern the new that you're doing in my life. Is it at Northway? That's my church. Or is it with the Steelers? Is it with both of them? Is it something else completely different? Either way, God, I need clarity. And so I lay all of this down at your feet because I'm anxious to know what you want for me and my family and my church family. You may have something else entirely in mind, but I can sense that you've been up to something new for a long time in my life. You can hear the frustration in there, right? So then I put the pen down and I go on to the next passage, and I don't have all kinds of time to explain this passage, but Ezekiel 37, 1 through 9, and I'm not going to preach here today. That's not my role. I'm just here to tell you my story, and essentially what I got from this passage as I read it, essentially what happens is God downloads a vision to a man by the name of Ezekiel with a really powerful lesson in it. And here was the lesson. God said to Ezekiel, I want you to say exactly what I tell you to say. And Ezekiel said it, and boom, a supernatural move of God begins to take place. God then says again to Ezekiel, now I want you to do exactly what I tell you to do. And Ezekiel did it. And boom, a supernatural move of God continued to take place. And then this particular passage of Scripture in that prayer guide ended with this. Take a look at this. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, that I have done what I said. Yes, the Lord has spoken. And at that very moment, I don't know how to explain it to you, but I just knew that something was about to break through in my 3-year waiting period. So this is what I wrote to God. I have a great thing going with my church, God. I'm just wondering what you're doing with the Steelers chaplain role. And then I asked him this question. Am I initiating that? Because if so, I lay it down and I'll continue to wait for you. Because how many of us know that when we initiate something, we have to sustain it in our own strength, in our own power, in our own resources, in our own ideas. But when God initiates something, He permeates it with His strength, with His provision, with His ideas. And I wanted what He wanted. And so I said, God, I lay it all down. If I'm initiating it, I lay it down, and I will wait for you. As soon as I wrote that, the trainers came up over the loudspeakers, and they said, Ollie, income free, prayer experience is over, come back into the room. And so I started gathering up my things, and I kid you not, everybody, this is the power of writing things down in a journal. Because at 10:24 a.m. California time, Coach Tomlin texted me. And he said, can you grab lunch in the next few days to talk about the position? My hands trembled, everybody. As I began to call my wife, and I said, I think I'm about to become the chaplain to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, mind you, he hadn't even offered me the position. But I just knew something was about to happen. So I go to lunch with Coach T, and it was an amazing lunch. I loved everything that he was saying. Here's what he said first. I'm looking for a local Pittsburgh couple to be pastors to this team. And I was like, I get to do this with my wife? This is awesome. And then he lays out his vision for the chaplain role, and he says, man, I would love for you to do Bible studies for the players and Bible studies for the coaches and Bible studies for the support staff. And I would love if your wife would do that for the coaches' wives and the players' wives and girlfriends and for the front office ladies. And then, man, if you could do a couples ministry together. And I loved everything that I was hearing Coach T saying until he said this. This position is not hired by the Pittsburgh Steelers, so I would love for you to consider joining the staff of Athletes in Action. To which I knew exactly what that meant for me. See, I've known people who have served with Athletes in Action, which, if you don't know what that is, it is a sports ministry of the missions organization Cru, formerly known as Campus Crusade for Christ. And I knew that all of those people, they had to raise their full-time salaries. They had to raise their, benefits. They had to raise all of their budgeting. And so in my mind at that point, I'm like shutting it all down. I'm like, this would be crazy. Have you ever done this where you're, somebody's talking to you, but you're having a conversation or thinking about somebody? So I'm having it out with God in this moment. I'm like, God, you got to be kidding me, man. Like, I got 3 teenage daughters. You know that, right? I'm staring college tuition right in the face, man. I got 3 weddings that I need to financially plan for. It would be insane for me. There's no way that you want me to step away from a secure income and a great position to become a full-time missionary. There's got to be another way. And very quickly, you can see where my internal reaction was revealing where I placed my trust. And my trust was in a paycheck. My trust was in a position. My trust was in me, providing for my family, instead of the God that I've been preaching for 25 years. And I say that out loud now as a pastor, and I get embarrassed by that. But I have a feeling I'm not the only one here. Can anybody else relate? So the meeting ended with me cordially agreeing, because that's what you do with Mike Tomlin, right? I said all the right things, and I said, man, I'll continue down the search process. But internally, I was shutting it all down. I went home to Erica, and bottom line, everybody, I was afraid to step out like that. But we both shut it down. I'm like, this is insane, God. It was revealing where we were, but here's the thing. I gave Coach T my word. We couldn't shut down the process, so we agreed that we would fast and we would pray to see if this was really God. And one day, I kid you not, everybody, this is wild. As Erica was on our back patio, she was praying, and I'm inside and I'm reading, and all of a sudden I hear my wife, get out here. And I'm like, whoa. I come outside, and the fern is moving beside my wife. And immediately, I'm going, I think it's a snake. And I'm freaking out. Because and she's freaking out. She's like frozen. But I got to man up in this moment. So I go to find a stick, and I'm like inching over to the fern. And like, let's see how close I can get. And as soon as I got close enough, a bird flew out of the fern, and I opened up inside, and there was a baby bird's nest with 3 little eggs inside of it. And over the next couple of weeks, as Erica and I prayed and we fasted and we considered this position, those baby bird eggs, they hatched. And we heard them chirping, feed me, right? However they chirped, right? And Mama Bird would come in and she would feed them. And Daddy Bird was perched up on our light pole, and he was making sure that we weren't going to mess with his kids. And all of a sudden, in my mind and in hers, we remembered the words of Jesus that I've read so many times. Look at this. Look at the birds of the air. They don't sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than a bird? I mean, you can see that God was really taking us to school about what it is that we were trusting in this life. So in that moment, Erica and I decided together in unity that we would put our feet in our family where our mouth had been all of these years. And so we took the step, please watch this, with fear, fighting our faith. And even though we were still afraid, we decided we're going to do this. And so we flew out to Colorado. And this happened to coincide with Athletes in Action meeting together with all of the crew, other missionaries, 6,000 plus missionaries. And this is where we signed on the dotted line. We did it. We stepped out to become full-time missionaries. But to be honest, we were freaking out. And you wouldn't blame us, right? We were freaking out in this moment. Even though we knew that this was something that God's calling us to do, Erica will tell you if she was here, how she deals with stress as she goes for a run. And so that night that we signed on the dotted line, it was a bad night. I mean, if I'm honest with you, fellas, just imagine your wife has locked herself in the bathroom and all you hear is, and I'm like, what did I do? Right? And I wake up the next morning and she's not in the bed. And I didn't know where she went. And I'm like, oh, great. This is getting to be too much for her. But here she had gone on a run to just clear her head. And on the side of the road in the middle of Colorado State University, we didn't even know where we were. She had this moment where she broke down. She was crying out to God saying, I need something to make sure that you're in this. So God, please. Have you ever had that kind of moment? God, please, come on. But I didn't know she was doing any of this. So she comes back and we get ready for the last particular portion of the sessions that we could attend. Now imagine this, everybody. Colorado State University. There is a giant basketball coliseum, and in the center court of their basketball floor, there's a giant round stage. Have you ever been a part of a concert like this? Well, we had floor seats. And we were on this side of the round stage, and on the other side of the round stage, there was a painter who was painting during the singing, the worship portion. And if you've never heard 6,000 plus missionaries worshiping, oh my goodness, it was a powerful moment. But we cannot see what the painter is painting because the canvas back is what we can see. And the camera is intentionally not revealing what he's painting so furiously. But then the music dies down. And the camera pans back. And what do you think that the painter painted that day? Take a look. Erica and I just looked at each other and we wept. Like, come on, that's so specific. And even though we were still afraid, we left that day confident that God was going to take care of us every step of the way. And so as I close here today, the reason that I share our story with you is because I wonder if there might be somebody here today who has grown too comfortable. And you're trusting in a paycheck. You're trusting in a great position. You're trusting in a person instead of God. And you know that God has been calling you to step into something, but you're hesitating. You're killing that dream that's been inside of you. You've squashed the idea because someone just told you it's just too risky. It doesn't make logical sense, but you know in your knower that you're supposed to do it. So Davin invited me to encourage somebody today to do it afraid. To do it afraid. So man, you've been dating her too long. It's time to pop the question. Do it afraid, right? It is time for you to pitch that new idea to your boss. Do it afraid. It's time for you to start that new thing that you have been dreaming of. Do it afraid. Man, it is time for you to get rid of the safety net and step into the what if. Do it afraid. This world needs that new idea. Do it afraid. Please do not let fear rob you of what God has for you. So I don't know what it is for you, Purpose Summit. You know it in your knower what God's calling you to do. I just came here to encourage somebody to trust God and to do it afraid. I want to thank you all for allowing me to be able to be here. I am just honored that Davin would allow me to be and share my story with this absolutely amazing community. God bless.